Thank you for joining us for this episode of HR and Cocktails. For those of you that are new, HR and Cocktails is a podcast about all things HR. Today, we're joined by Cheryl Brown of Davis Agnor, Rapaport, and Skalny, and we're going to be talking about culture wars, navigating political conversations in the workplace. So Cheryl, thank you. Welcome back. We always enjoy having you here.
Thank you, Kimberly, for having me back.
Yes, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about you and your law firm.
Thank you. As you know, my name is Cheryl Brown. I'm with Davis Agnor, Rapaport, and Skalny. We're a business transactional firm in Columbia, Maryland. I am head up the labor and employment division of that group. And, I have to say, which I haven't said before, we also have other practices. We have a family law practice, an estate planning practice, community association practice, and litigation. But I am part of the business transactional group.
Yep. Awesome. So thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us. So the topic today is navigating political and social tensions in the workplace. And
do we have those?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't even know where this topic came from. But I think that, given, some of the things that have been just happening in general, people are very adamant on one side or another of particular topics, right? So some of the things that we're seeing now are conversations around DEI, whether it should stay, whether it should go. On a national level, the conversation is one thing. And so in the workplace, it's another. And so people have very strong feelings about that. And they're expressing them in the workplace, which is putting business owners, leaders, HR people in a position where they're having to navigate how those conversations are happening, not necessarily facilitating the conversations in as much as, helping people to be respectful, determining whether it's a conversation that needs to be had here, whether, this is the place for it, et cetera. So with all of that being said, right, what are you seeing recently around some of the challenges that businesses are having with those types of conversations?
Yeah, I think that difficult conversations are not new to HR. It is something that has really been in the workplace for a while. What has changed or evolved over the years is social media and the access to information and how fast people see the information. And if you are watching a news channel, you're going to be inundated with certain points of view. If you were looking at your social media page, you will be seeing different points of view. So people are kind of overloaded with information and they react to it just as fast as they are receiving that information. And when you're reacting, you can't always control that reaction outside of the workplace or inside of the workplace. So people have opinions about what they're seeing. So while we as employment attorneys or HR professionals are trained to deal with those difficult conversations and to advise our clients on how to handle that, it's not new to us. It may be a different topic. It may be how they express it. It may be that it's coming faster than it was before, or it's more prevalent now than it ever was before. We really just have to take a breath and kind of realize, okay, how are we going to navigate this? My clients often say, I feel like as an employer, I can't do anything anymore. That employees kind of get to do and say whatever they want. And I have no, I don't want to use the control, but that I have no way of balancing work and what these conversations look like. Like, I need to be able to run my business in a fair, safe space, but I do want employees to come to work and work.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we're going to get into what some of that looks like. But before we do that, I know we are going to have a cocktail. What cocktail would you like today?
Today, I chose the Cadillac Margarita.
Yes.
And margaritas are one of my favorites. And I think as we head into summer, then it's definitely a drink that we should all have. And the Cadillac Margarita, we do elevate with a little Grand Marnier, and it makes it that much more special.
I love it. I love it. So Cadillac Margarita coming up. So Cheryl, you chose for your drink a Cadillac Margarita. What made you choose that?
This Kimberly is actually my favorite drink. We in our household, we love Mexican food, and so what's better with Mexican food than a margarita? And I do elevate my margarita to the Cadillac Margarita because it has that little orange flavor, which you will now show us, but I love it.
I know. So awesome. So we are going to prepare, Cheryl is not a lover of salt necessarily.
I'm not.
So we're going to do a partial salt rim. So we'll just rub the lime on it and then just dip it in the salt. This is some pretty chunky salt too, by the way. So we'll just dip that in.
I think that I can't believe I never knew that I could do a partial rim. Like that's just things you learn. So anyway, that has now changed my margarita tremendously.
Not 100% sure.
If you want salt, you can
Obligated to do the entire thing.
Why? I know. Well, that's because that's what they do in the restaurant.
Yes.
So, but I like the partial
I
rim.
always tell them half salt when I'm at the restaurant. I'm like, I want half salt.
Now I'm gonna say that.
Yeah.
That's
Yes. All right. So we'll just put some ice in our glasses
Okay.
so it's ready once we go. So we're going to start. We have some ice already in our shaker. And then we're going to put some tequila in here. My tequila of choice is Reposado.
Reposado. It's
Really good. I prefer Reposado.
Thank you for picking that.
Yes, of course, of course. So we're going to put 4 ounces of tequila in our shaker. And
All the other cocktail podcasts I do don't use that tequila.
I know. I like to do things high end here.
The high-end HR and cocktails.
Exactly. And then we're going to do Grand Marnier, which is what takes it to the next level. We are going to use 3 ounces of Grand Marnier. That's what's going to give it our sweet and cut some of the tequila, like.
Yeah. If you haven't tried a Cadillac Margarita, you should try it. It really tastes delicious.
It does. So then we will use some fresh squeezed lime juice. I squeezed the limes. So we are going to use 3 ounces of lime juice, or how much we have.
Yeah, fresh is better.
Yep, exactly. And then we'll use just a little bit of simple syrup because we actually have quite a bit of Grand Marnier in here, which was actually sweet already.
A little extra. Grand Marnier.
Exactly.
It's my favorite.
Yep. I
like
know.
I like to say.
Yeah.
My favorite.
Yes.
Okay.
Awesome. So then we are going to pour it out. Oh yeah.
Oh, that looks beautiful.
Color. Yep, that is a good color. And
It's a great drink for Cinco de Mayo.
it is. I know. It is. So we will get our little straws and cheers. Hey.
Ooh, that's good. That is good.
All right, so Cheryl, we are having our margaritas, and this one's it's pretty tasty.
It's very tasty.
Yeah, it's pretty tasty. So as we are thinking about, employers feeling kind of sometimes like their hands are a little bit tied. Employees, wanting to. Particularly, so let's just kind of put it out there. So particularly as it relates to, DEI. On the national level, much of the conversation is DEI is not necessary, it needs to go away, and it will no longer be funded from a federal perspective. And if businesses have certain language, they may lose funding. So as we think about some businesses, whether they're government contractors, nonprofits that are receiving federal funds that may have had some of those initiatives, employees many times went into those organizations because they were tied to the mission, because they were tied to the thought that this organization valued X or Y. And so now that some of that is going away, people are being vocal about it in the workplace and want to engage in conversation about it. So whether it's fair, not fair, we agree or don't agree, really is not a part of the conversation here today, in as much as how do organizations navigate that? If an employee is like, I am upset, why are we taking this statement down? That means you don't value me. How do we navigate that? How do we navigate that?
So interestingly enough, our firm just had we do these candid conversations, and we had about 40 business owners come and talk about DEI in the workplace. And it's very timely. And what I have learned in listening to other business owners and listening to other perspectives is if you ask everyone, diversity in the workplace is not a bad thing. I think every organization values that. And at some level, every organization provides that. So some companies are like, well, why do I need a tagline if I embrace that already? It's part of our culture. It's who we are. And then I have others that need the tagline in order to demonstrate to their employees, hey, this is what we do. You have to, there has to be a balance. So if you're going to say, I don't want to do away with DEI, and it's just a tagline, it's not part of your culture, and you're just kind of slapping a label on it to appease your workplace, you are going to get those difficult conversations or those toxic conversations about, oh, well, you have it and therefore I'm not valued. If you have a culture that values it from the top down and you start embracing what that diversity looks like. And what I learned is diversity is one thing, making sure that that person feels that they are being treated equitably in the workplace is another thing, and that's where the culture comes from. Because you can look to hire diverse candidates. You can cast a wide net and say, I want all different types of diversity, whether it's age, whether it's race, whether it's nationality, whether it's disabilities. Like, you can do that. You can be purposeful because we value that. But when they're in your workplace, you have to also make sure it's part of your culture.
Right.
So everybody feels that they're being treated equitably.
Right. Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And I think that to the extent that you just had a statement and a label and it wasn't a part of your culture, then not having a statement doesn't matter in the first place.
Right.
So there's that part. And then, there are the people who just feel very adamant that that the statement needs to be there, and they want to engage in conversation about it. And sometimes that conversation turns political. And so when we have individuals in the workplace that are having political conversations, that can get very heated. It can be very charged, right? And so, and as employers, we shouldn't choose sides. It shouldn't be, this person's right or that person's wrong. So that's not.
Right.
And so how do we manage allowing people to express themselves, express concerns of maybe the direction of the organization without violating the feelings, or I don't really know the best way to say it, because some people tie political affiliation to a lot of things, right?
Right.
They feel that a political affiliation implies one thing or another.
Right.
So how do we allow people, or do we allow people to have those conversations?
So when I do training, one of the questions I usually ask to employees and supervisors and managers is, do you have the constitutional right to say whatever you want to say in the workplace? Do you, for example, I can say whatever word I want to say in the workplace because I have a freedom of speech. And it's an interesting conversation when we say in a private place of employment, you don't have that right
Right.
to say whatever you want to say in the workplace within the confines of the workplace and the work hours and the policies and the procedures that we have. So, for example, if I want to say the F word every single day because that's the way I was raised and it wasn't a bad word, and I go into my workplace and we have a policy that says no obscenities, which is very common in the workplace, and I just want to say it and I get reprimanded, and I'd be like, well, that's the way I was brought up. You can't keep me from saying that.
Right.
It's the same when we start talking about politics. It's the same when we start talking about any controversial topic. It could be, harassment. That was the Me Too movement was very controversial in some regards. Making sure that your policies and procedures follow what your rules are and how you navigate that. But then allowing your employees, if you want to have that safe space, to have those conversations during lunch, after work, even having maybe office hours where employees do want to come to leadership and say, I just want to share this and I want to hear your perspective and I just want to just be able to have a safe space to have those conversations. But when you're at work, those conversations usually detract from your ability to get your job done or from the other employees who have a completely different view. And now we're spending time having those conversations. So if you create a safe space where they can have it, that allows it, and we respect everybody's diversity in the workplace, but in a safe environment. But yes, there are rules where you can't say certain things while you're at work. And that's a hard reality, I think, for some employees.
Yeah,
And business owners,
100%.
yeah.
Yes, 100%. Yes, and there are business owners that do feel like they can also say whatever
Right.
they
I
want.
was, yeah. Yes.
But I think that the point that you made about diversity, one of the things I think is important is that diversity isn't always about physical characteristics. It can also be diversity of thought, diversity of opinion. And so there needs to be a safe space for that as well, right?
Right.
And so when you're providing those spaces for people, which I do think that there can be some benefits to that, as long as there are some ground rules, as long as there are some, boundaries around respect and not crossing the line and being clear about what that means. Because I do think that sometimes people get frustrated because they are unsure about what they can say and ask.
Yes.
And so sometimes it's really about making it okay to ask.
Right. Right.
Because
Exactly.
it's sometimes you just might not know. So, one thing that I know people have had questions about is, how do I know what pronoun someone uses? And is it okay for me to ask? Is it okay for me to ask you what your pronouns are, right?
Yeah.
And then on the flip side of that, there are people who are very, very adamant about their pronouns. And if someone's afraid to ask and you're very adamant about your pronouns, they may I think they say misgender. Is that the word that is used sometimes in that instance?
Oh, you are way ahead of me.
Okay. And so, or you may not be aware. So I also know that there is a thing where if you have decided that you want to present in a different way than you used to present, and you change your name, that if someone calls you by your old name, that's your dead name. And
okay.
yeah, and so
Okay, got it.
that there's also people. So all of those things that happen, and when people don't feel comfortable to just be able to ask the question,
Right.
like, what name would you prefer? I know that you're now presenting in this way. Have you changed your pronouns? Do I need to address you in a different way? People are sometimes uncomfortable without how, from an employment perspective, do we create an environment where people feel comfortable respectfully asking those questions so that they don't upset someone or offend someone.
Right. Again, and I'm going to sound like, a broken record here, that it really comes from the leadership down and the culture that we're in. And if you are not approachable, if you do not have open doors to invite people in to have those conversations, if you don't talk about them, either through training, small groups, if you don't have a conversation, people will feel uncomfortable and they will feel like it's taboo to even say it. So it shouldn't come as a surprise to business owners when all of a sudden people on their email are either changing their pronouns without having a conversation, writing things on their emails that may be pro-political one way or another way, like sharing their viewpoints on their business email exchange. And a business owner's like, well, wait a minute, why should they be allowed to do that? And I'm saying, well, we need to have a conversation. What's the protocol on how people can respond to email? What can they put on their email? Are we an organization that expresses things? Are we not an organization that expresses things? So I think and I hate to say that we put a lot on leadership, but yes, there's a lot on leadership to be the leader and create that culture and have that trickle down to the employees. And then you are going to have a more robust, diverse, communicative organization.
Yeah.
Dress code is another one where people feel that they can express themselves, and people want to wear hats that express themselves or t-shirts because now we have a more relaxed policy, and they want to be able to wear, whether it's political slogans or viewpoints on t-shirts. And we have policies on how you dress and what you do. And again, while you're in the workplace, we have to be aware because you might believe something passionately. Absolutely support that. But that doesn't mean everyone else believes the same thing you do.
Right. And sometimes the things that you believe may be offensive to
Right.
someone
Absolutely.
else. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that doesn't say anything about you as a person necessarily.
Right.
It's just that you and I believe different things, and the thing that you believe impacts me in a way that makes me feel either uncomfortable or so yes, absolutely. So we definitely have to think about that. And that's a good point when we talk about dress code, is thinking about when we're having that casual dress, no, political statements and, and some people may feel like certain things are not political. That's just something I hold dear. And it's like, okay, so how do we address that and making sure that we're, putting parameters around that so that people can feel comfortable. But I will also say that as it relates to being approachable, et cetera, one thing that leaders have to do is not be afraid. They need to understand to your point, no, at work, everyone does not have the First Amendment right to say whatever they want to say, right? And so when they understand that, then they can feel more comfortable that when someone comes to them and say, well, I can do this or I can do that, or why is this person saying this or that? When they understand it better, they're better able to address the situation. Because I find, and I don't know what you see, but a lot of times they're just paralyzed by fear. They're just like, I don't know what they can do. I don't know what they can say. So I just told them I don't know. And when employees don't feel that the leaders in their organization have a handle on a situation, that's when things start to go awry, So they really need to get an understanding of what's okay in the workplace.
Well, and I think that goes to supporting policies and procedures, having things in writing, because most everything you can fall back onto your policies and procedures. It may not say, don't wear a hat that has a cat falling out of a window or whatever, but you can say, we don't wear hats with whatever. So you have to look at your policies and procedures and be able to your point, be confident in relying upon those. The other thing that I'm a huge advocate for is live training. And I know it's not easy for every organization to have it, but when you have those live trainings and have those conversations in a kind of safe space, you will learn so much about your employees and they will value that way more because you've invested in them to be able to talk about it and have conversations. So I'm a huge advocate for live training.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think that having that third party there that's knowledgeable,
Right.
people feel like they can ask more questions. So to that point, I did a training with a group of construction workers, managers a month or so ago. And that was one of the questions. Like somebody said something and I said, I prefer to refer to myself as Black. I don't refer to myself as African American. And the woman said, yeah, she's like, well, I understand that. But in the Hispanic culture, Black is not ascribed to people. Black is not ascribed to people. And so she said that they would describe it differently. So she explained how it's described in the Hispanic culture. And I was like, oh, okay, I definitely get that. She said, so and for me, if I refer to you as Black, that would not feel natural to me because we don't use the word Black for people, right?
Right.
And so I was like, this is a good dialogue. This is
Right.
She's like, but
Absolutely.
I wouldn't know in the workplace whether it would be okay for me to have that conversation, for me to say that. And so in
Right.
that training, we were able to kind of talk about it and put it out there. So I agree that the in-person training kind of gets the guards down
Right.
and gets people out of their defensive posture and more willing to hear. So I 100% agree with that. But before we end, I want to talk about a little bit about social media. And so we talked about social media and how quickly people can get information, but also people use social media as their platform. And so
Yes.
with that, sometimes they do and say things. They may be connected to people at work. They may have the name of their company on their social media page. They may be using their LinkedIn page, which has a whole nother new nuance to me that I didn't expect to see. So what are the limitations for employers as it relates to how people express themselves on social media, particularly if they are associated with your company?
Right. And I think social media is a little more challenging because, to your point, it is their personal expression. And Facebook used to be where everyone, from a personal standpoint, that's where you talk about your kids and your vacations and what you like and what you don't like and the food you eat and all of that. And then LinkedIn was typically the professional space where we can network and we can share ideas and we can connect with our professional colleagues. Things kind of have been blurred. Because things are so connected. Like you post something on one, it's automatically posted on another. So everything is now interconnected. And what you may think is your personal expression now is linked to your professional expression. And I think companies, and again, back to our policies, should have social media policies and educate or communicate to their employees about the implications of what possibly could come back to the company. Because we've seen so many cases where an individual has expressed themselves and that has impacted the company, whether they support the company, whether they disagree with the company, and it has a negative impact on the company, and they are becoming that media voice on behalf of the company when they don't have the authority to become the media voice on behalf of the company, because the company has its own policies, its own values, its missions, and all of that. So you have to have a conversation, educate your employees, help them recognize if you are going to be friends with every single person in your professional environment on Facebook, you are an extension of that workplace. So you have to be careful, because while you're posting about, hey, look at this great article that my company put out, and oh, by the way, look at this great article that I wrote that, whatever, makes a political statement, and those, all of a sudden it impacts, or there's a disengagement between the values and the mission of the company. It will come back to the company. So you want to respect people's personal beliefs, because that is their outside of the work, they can do that, but educate them to understand the implications in the workplace.
Yeah, because I will say LinkedIn has turned a lot more. People are putting more personal stories on there, and a lot of political commentary has been on there. I actually noticed a month or so ago that there was a button that said, "Would you like to see less political commentary?"
Oh,
on
wow.
LinkedIn. Yes,
Interesting.
And I said,
Okay.
"Yes, please."
Yes.
And so, with that, I mean, you have your employer on there. I mean, it's usually in your headline, like I am,
Oh, yeah.
president of Prescott HR. So the language that I'm using and the commentary that I'm engaging in is going to be a reflection on the business.
Right.
And so that's one thing that, from an employer perspective, that having a policy on, making sure that, you are careful about the
Right.
comments that you make, that for which your title and the company that you work for are attached to it.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
LinkedIn is definitely that place.
And I've seen companies fire employees for postings on Facebook if they use obscene language, or if they use discriminatory language or racial slurs. Absolutely, because it reflects poorly. And we've seen it in the news. Someone says something on TikTok, someone says something on Facebook. It reflects badly on them.
Yep.
And then they are impacted, as well as the organization that they are connected with.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Cheryl, thank you so much for taking the time to share your insights on this very important topic. Definitely appreciate that. I always love it when you come and visit
Thank you,
us.
Kimberly.
Yes, and thank you for joining us for this episode of HR and Cocktails.